Let's go to Rainer Sabin. Rainer Sabin, about midway through the year, he put his name in the transfer portal. He went for Mayo.com, which he did a fabulous job of covering the University of Alabama. He went to the Detroit Free Press. Now he covers the Michigan Wolverines, Michigan State, and the Big Ten. Rainer Sabin, welcome back to Tuscaloosa, man. I hope all is well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's kind of funny that it worked out this way where you start the season covering Alabama and finish the season out covering Alabama.
Well, I think you could offer a very unique perspective. But talk about your job there at the Detroit Free Press and kind of what you're doing as you cover that style of football compared to what happened here in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's interesting to see the different styles. I mean, clearly there are better athletes in the SEC, and it's not even a question. And the talent differential is pretty stark. You see it, especially in the depth of these teams, and then also just even like special teams play. I mean, there's no player that's like Jalen Waddle.
Wow.
Kind of like returning punts and kicks. In the Big Ten, or that person is there's only one of them. Like Penn State had the receiver's name is escaping me, but he's the only player on that roster who has that ability, that game-breaking ability. And and so it's just kind of interesting to watch. Whereas Alabama has 4, 5, 6, 7 legit playmakers. A lot of these teams only have 1 or 2, maybe with the exception of Ohio State.
Rainer, when you look at the Michigan Wolverines, let's just focus on that fan base for just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
What's the excitement level there? What's the excitement level from that side? Because, see, we look at the Citrus Bowl here, and as you know, you covered this place. It's kind of like it's downer, right? But I'm curious.
It's a huge downer.
Yeah.
It's a huge downer for Alabama.
Yeah. What's
and they should feel down. I mean, because it's not what they gun for every year. I mean, they're looking for national championships. Michigan, it's different. I think that they've been beaten down so much because what's going on with the Ohio State rivalry. I mean, 14 out of the last 15 years, Ohio State's won that game. And, they've kind of, been a roadblock to them being able to, get to where they want to be, which is, obviously competing for a college football playoff spot too. I just don't think that, they have, as much of a legitimate shot to claim one of those as maybe they think that they do. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect with reality with Michigan fans, and I think where they want the program to be versus what the reality of it is. And so, whereas with Alabama, I mean, it's not crazy to think that they should win a national championship every year. Whereas with Michigan, they would like to be in that conversation. But, I mean, history has shown that they really aren't in that conversation very much, and, in spite of what their aspirations are.
What would get Jim Harbaugh in trouble as far as developing on a hot seat?
It's a good question. I mean, you think going 0-5 against your biggest rival and getting blown out consecutive years against the Buckeyes would probably put him on the hot seat, but that's just not the case here. I think, they see that Harbaugh has brought the program back to some level of respectability after the Rich Rod, Brady Hoke, run. And so they know that it could get worse and it could get really bad. They're, in kind of a peculiar state. I mean, I think, they're kind of caught up between the rock and a hard place in the sense that, like, they could be better, but they know that, it could also get really, really bad again. And so I think they feel comfortable with Harbaugh and what he's done. And, they'll take their lumps with Ohio State, and maybe, a couple other losses, each season. If they could get 9-10 wins, it'd be, talked about, and mostly, having what's perceived as a successful season in a place like this.
Rainer, when you look at this matchup, Vegas has it about 7 points. When you look at the matchup between Michigan and Alabama, you've covered both of these programs in the same year, which I think gives you a chance to offer a very unique perspective. What do you think? And I know you talked about the speed a couple of minutes ago, and there's no Jalen Waddle, but look at how does Michigan win this football game from your perspective? How can they match up and go toe-to-toe with Alabama?
I think Michigan, I hate to say this, but I think Alabama would have to sit quite a few players for Michigan to have a chance in this game.
Really? Okay.
Because I just don't. Their skill players are good, but they're not great. I mean, I talked to an NFL personnel guy who's seen both of these programs, and he said that basically there's nobody on the defensive side with Michigan that could start at Alabama, and I would agree with that. I mean, I don't think that there's that talent level that exists really at any spot, even on defense. I mean, they've got good players. They don't have great players. And I think that's also, on offense, they talked so much about this receiving core, but the receiving core pales in comparison to Alabama's receiving core. And so in pretty much every position group, I mean, you'd have to give the advantage almost to Alabama because there's just so much more talent at each of these positions. I mean, even linebacker, I mean, they have the inexperience at Alabama, but, those guys are going to blossom into probably, great players. And, I think that there's a ceiling for the players at Michigan. I mean, they're good to an extent, but not to the level that Alabama's players are.
Rainer, when you look at Alabama, in your opinion, what went wrong for Alabama? Yes, LSU had a historic year, but defensively, this team is not one of those defenses that you kind of expect. Defensive efficiency, if you want to look at some of ESPN's metrics, I know there were a couple of injuries at key spots hurt, but defensive efficiency, this was not one of Nick Saban's best defensive units. Your perspective, when you look at Alabama's defensive side of the football, what went wrong?
I really do think the injuries at inside linebacker were huge. I mean, you know how important that position is. I mean, they, coordinate everything, the pass coverage, and, it comes down to run fits and just being able to know where you're supposed to be at any given time. I mean, I think one of the most underrated players in the time that I covered at Alabama, I mean, really underrated, was Sean Deion Hamilton. He just knew exactly where to be at all times and really was a huge component to that 2016 defense that was a generational. I mean, and they've fallen off big time because, one, they've had all the coaching turnover, especially at, the defensive coordinator at Alabama handles inside linebackers. And so they cycled through so many of the guys and those years since. And also, I mean, they've run through players and they don't have the experience that they did at one point. And I think that's a huge factor. I also don't think they have some of the types of players that they had with that kind of relentless attitude. You don't see as many of those on the team. I mean, you don't have the Reuben Fosters and the Ryan Andersons and some of those, pretty much just, are, hair on fire type of players. And I think, they need to get back to maybe, getting some of those guys. I mean, Raekwon was always a interesting guy to cover because, I mean, again, that guy has so much potential, but I don't know if he had the kind of mentality it took to be truly great. And so you didn't have that Jonathan Allen attitude, the kind of go after it every play and not let, bad plays, get you down and those kind of things. And so I think that's one of the other big differences too. But I think it comes down to inside linebackers and also the mentality of the overall mentality of the defense itself.
But here in Tuscaloosa, as you look at things and you begin to look at this year, if you go through the different depth chart and you start eliminating guys and you say, okay, they lose this guy to the NFL draft, this guy to the NFL draft. Now, if they get some of those guys back, it might be a great 2020. But it could also, if they lose a lot of these guys, it could be a big-time rebuilding in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I think and the schedule is tough too in 2020, and you can see them maybe taking a step back. The other thing is though, again, those inside linebackers did get a ton of experience this year, and so they come back, and I think they'll have more of a solid foundation than typically anybody who's a freshman at that position would have. Like, it was, maybe with the exception of going back to like a Rolando McClain and a C.J. Mosley type guy. I mean, back in the day. But I mean, like, yeah, I think it's gonna be tough. I mean, it's always tough for Nick Saban to have to replace these guys, and he has to do it more often because now, it's become a situation across college football now where you have players that just stay 3 years and then they go. I mean, and so he's constantly having to do this where, replace the pieces in defense. And I think it's also hurts that, he doesn't have as an experience of a coordinator, to do some of that stuff and maybe scheme to the advantage of the players. But it's, the offenses, again, also in college football have evolved to the point where they really attack, kind of a Sabin defense. And, if they have, inexperience, I mean, especially because a lot of the teams now are incorporating motions into the offense, maybe more so than they were when they were just going strict no huddle. And I think that's a huge impact on Saban's defense because he looks at the alignment and then they make the adjustments off of that. And, that's something that, I wanted to write a story, I guess, about maybe this season before I left. I never got to it, but I think that that's also impacted how, Saban's been able to have success defensively, in recent years.
Ryan Sabin, as we covered the Michigan Wolverines, he covers it for the Detroit Free Press. He's covered it for the University of Alabama at AL.com. He's covered the Dallas Cowboys. Rainer, when you hear and you depart and you hear that Tua Tagovailoa is weighing all of his options coming off of the injury against Mississippi State, you've covered the NFL. You know what type of dog-eat-dog world that is up at the next level. When you hear that Tua Tagovailoa is considering coming back, what were your thoughts when you hear things like that?
I mean, I thought I was pretty surprised. I mean, I have to say, because, I mean, I think, again, you only have a certain shelf life. But, I mean, if he thinks he can improve his draft stock and get into that upper tier, I mean, the differential in money, I mean, is pretty substantial. I would think his goal is to get to his second contract. So, I mean, even if he, got drafted mid to late round, he still would have a chance to, have a huge payday, given that if he is indeed healthy in the early part of his NFL career. But, as far as like skill level and whether he'll be successful in the NFL, I mean, if he looks like the player that we all saw when he played, I mean, I think he has a great chance of success. I mean, there's very rare to see a college quarterback be able to throw guys open the way that he can and, again, anticipate, where the defenders are going to be and be able to find the holes in the defense as well as he does. I mean, he has a very high level of processing that's going on in his brain, to be able to see things. And, it was really impressive. Like, he's one of the most impressive college football players I've seen ever, and, I saw Darren McFadden when he was at Arkansas, and I think he was one of the most impressive running backs. I mean, Tua's like that on the quarterback level. I mean, he's just kind of ahead of the game in a lot of ways. And there's guys in the NFL that don't do what he was able to do at the college level.
Rainer, final question. When you see players sitting out bowl games, not the big bowls, but the second tier bowls, what's your thoughts?
I don't really blame them because again, there's a lot of money at stake.
Sure.
And again, I think these games don't really have a lot of meaning. In fact, if I were a coach, I wouldn't even want to necessarily play some of these guys, especially if they're going to be moving on. I'd rather get a look at the younger guys and get them ready to go for, see what they're capable of doing and give them, reps when the bullets are flying, so to speak. And I think it's more valuable to use these games if you're in a bowl game to advance the next season, not use it as necessarily a way of rewarding the seniors or whatever you want to do it. I mean, it should be used in a practical sense to get your team set for the next year, set the tone for the next year. And, I think, getting some looks at some younger guys that maybe you didn't have a chance, against a quality opponent, I think is important. You get those chances against, the FCS team they play before Auburn, but that's against a low-quality opponent. Here, you're playing a quality opponent, and, you get a chance to maybe play some younger guys to get ahead next season. I think that's how it should be. It should be used, especially with the fact that you have the college football playoff now. Now, if it was the bowl games in the way that it used to be, where, that there was a possibility of it influencing the ranking and where you finish and how you could sell the program going into next year to recruits for signing day. But again, all by then, by the time the bowl games are playing, so you don't even get that effect really. So it's to me, it should be used for next year.
Rainer Sabin, I'll make you jealous. Not a severe weather this afternoon, but it's currently 74 degrees in Tuscaloosa, Alabama today.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. It's funny. It's like the severe weather always comes when it's also like really warm, unseasonably warm or something like that. And then, of course, the rain comes and then it cools down, and that's how it works down there. But here it's just cold, and then there's a possibility it might snow. Maybe not. But yeah, it's the climate has been an adjustment for sure.
Hey, when does Michigan go back out on the practice field?
That's a good question. I think that this sometime this week. We haven't even got an availability list. So I don't even know if they're going to have any media availability before they go off to the Citrus Bowl. Yeah, it's odd. Yeah, I know that things are starting back up there today. So.
Rainer Sabin, Detroit Free Press, who has covered also the University of Alabama. Hey, thanks for catching up, man. Merry Christmas from all of us here in Tuscaloosa. Thank you for making us part of your afternoon.
Yes, Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Thanks so much.